hello, welcome back to Let's Talk Bradbury. If you've not subscribed to our channel, please do. So let's jump right into today's review, which is of the Exiles, written in 1949, originally titled The Mad Wizards of Mars. In the year 2120 rather, a rocket is on its way to Mars, but on board the men begin to have nightmares of things from literature, actually. And on board there happens to be the last surviving copies of Poe, Ambrose Bierce, Washington Irving, Mary Shelley, Bram Stoker, Charles Dickens, and even H.P. Lovecraft is mentioned by name. All fantastic fiction had been banned 100 years ago in 2020, which is ironically the year it is now, and has been largely forgotten. Meanwhile, on Mars, manifestations of these authors and the places and the characters from their books have taken on a life of their own, and fearing that they will die when the last books are destroyed, and if they were found here on Mars now, they fear this is going to happen, so they begin projecting nightmares into the minds, into the imaginations of the men on their rocket to prevent them from coming there and sort of continuing the genocide that was put upon creative fiction 100 years earlier. But it's too late. The rocket arrives. They're on to them. They burn the last remaining copies of these books. The Emerald City disappears in the distance. Poe, Charles Dickens, who felt like he was unfairly bunched in with this group because of A Christmas Carol, and all the others fade away into nothingness, having been finally destroyed for good and removed from the human psyche. Yeah, neat little story. Not the first time that Ray Bradbury wrote about this topic of burning or destroying books. We of course got that in Fahrenheit 451. I think it's pretty cool that I happen to be reading this story in the year 2020, which is the year of the banning of books in this universe. I don't see that happening here. Of course, there are always little, concerns about censorship, but in terms of creative fiction, and not just on paper, but also in movies and TV screen, I think is healthier than it's possibly ever been. All things nerdy and fantastical are possibly more popular than any point in history before. But there is some things that sort of ring true to this current climate. People fear that sort of nobody's reading anymore. And so I can sympathize with the characters and the authors and their fear of being forgotten. In this world, books were banned because the world had taken on an obsession with reason and fact and all these things, and they sort of feared how fiction makes you feel, how good art makes you feel. And on one hand, you have pleasant feelings, but of course, the place of art is not only to make you feel pleasant, it is to make you feel uncomfortable and feel shame at times, and sympathy and empathy, and it helps you to develop the ability to care about others and to learn emotions that are not easily found in the real world because of our safe situations that we live in today for the most part. I love the feeling of horror that I get from reading H.P. Lovecraft, for example, who is quite interestingly mentioned by name in this. And that's pretty cool because this story was first published in 1949. So that is just after Lovecraft died. So Bradbury clearly was on top of his game as far as staying in contact with what was happening. Lovecraft really didn't find a huge, adoring audience, and his importance was not understood until rather recently, many years later. And so the fact that Bradbury was on top of this in the 40s already tells me that he was a good judge of a character. Also, in parting, I love how the sort of the moral of the story is that characters and their worlds in these fictional universes sort of take on a life of their own in us as a communal experience, as fans, but also within us as individual people. For me, one of the big ones is J.R.R. Tolkien. I've been reading his books since I was a kid, and every time I go back and reread Tolkien, I feel like I'm revisiting old friends. So it feels like those worlds very much exist within me and within other fans, and it's a great sort of an explanation of what the fan community is by and large. We are a group of people who enjoy a certain type of art, and we understand that it is more than just, it's not mindless horror, it's not mindless science fiction fantasy. It's creating worlds that are fictional, but they have a heart, they have a grounding in realistic emotion. And because these locations and these scenarios are fantastic, I think it's better or more easily possible for people to sort of identify what these lessons are. And sometimes that gets lost in more realistic fiction where the attempt is to be realistic, and realism is turmoil. Realism is a lack of understanding because we're always in conflict trying to understand ourselves and what is going on. And because of that, you don't necessarily learn anything that you didn't already know, because you already intuitively know these things because you're experiencing them. So I think a little bit of escape is important for me, for good art. But it's not all escape. It is escape that leads to understanding and to learning and to growing as a person. So, all right, guys, The Exiles, written 1949, originally under the title The Mad Wizard of Mars by Ray Bradbury. I'll be back soon with another edition of Let's Talk Ray Bradbury. Next story is At Midnight in the Month of June. So look for that in a few days as we continue to read through the complete collection, Bradbury Stories, 100 stories, chosen by the author before his death. We are nearing the halfway point in this long ongoing project, but I hope to complete it and to see it through to the end. If not this year, then possibly by next year. So we will see. Please subscribe, and I'll see you again soon.